Hi. All right. Well, good morning. I'm really honored to be here speaking to you today. Thank you to the Reaktor folks for putting this on and inviting me, and for your hospitality. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the other talks as well myself. This is going to be good. Thank you very much. My name is David Gillis. That's me on Twitter. I'm an okay follow, no promises. I hustle, tweet out every now and again. I work at a company called TN & Lax. We're a digital agency that helps companies make products and services based in Toronto, Canada. And so this is my first time here in Finland and visiting Helsinki. So we do a bunch of things. You may have heard about us or know us a little bit through some of the tools and templates for design that you can download from our website, or maybe labs experiments that we've posted up, like the Google Street View hyperlapse stuff. So if the name rings a bell, maybe that's it. But the main thing that we do at TN & Lax is we work with startups and established digital product companies and enterprise companies to basically improve and conceive and bring to market digital products. And so it's great to have this opportunity to talk a little bit more today about what we do, how we do it, and what we're thinking about these days. We have this saying at TN & Lax that great digital products don't happen by accident. And so when we say great digital products, we've got a few specific markers in mind. So they get used, they get loved, we're proud of them, and we learn through the act of making them. That's what we mean by great digital products. And so a few years ago, the partners and I got into a room and we decided, let's try and write down that which we know to be true about how to make a great digital product. What are the steps and conditions that we think are important to producing something that's really good, based on our 10 years of experience. So we came up with a bunch of stuff, and we ended up kind of landing on these 6 points here. So assemble the right team. So we decided that we would have some opinions about how big or small teams should be. We thought it should be constrained in size, about 7 to 10 people, multidisciplinary, given focus and dedication, working towards a goal, solving real problems for real people. So not made up problems for imaginary persona people, but actual real problems, working towards measurable outcomes. So setting tangible, unambiguous goals that we would use to focus and then optimize our work, making decisions by using the product. We really wanted to get better at getting out of Photoshop and Sketch and getting into code and actually building stuff and using that as a way to gain a better vantage point on where to go next. Iterating and refactoring. So, having no sacred cows, being willing to tear stuff down if it's not working out well, and moving on to something else. And then because so much of our process was going to be geared, we could tell towards this sort of heads down, sprint-oriented level of focus, we knew that at some points we would need to pull our heads up and sort of look at the holistic experience that we were creating, because we felt like the best experiences were seamless ones. So this was good. This helped us essentially re-engineer our process and the way that we engaged with clients. And so this was kind of important. Another thing that we did a little later on was we decided to think about, okay, if that's our process and we start to have some opinions there, then what about our resourcing? What kinds of tools and skills are important? How are we doing? So we created these indices, basically, this laundry list of skills and tools that we wanted to grade ourselves on, and then understand where do we want to evolve and invest as a company, where are we okay not being so great because we can't do everything well. And so this was another tool that helped us start to evolve a little bit. But there was a problem, which was that the projects we were doing were running smoother, and the stuff that we were doing and making was good. It just wasn't consistently great, I would say. We would make things and, they would turn out to be okay. They would be clever, but, not compelling. They would be well-crafted, but not whole. There was something missing. A sense of conviction or passion, maybe, I don't know. A sense of true purpose. Like I said, good, just not great. And so we weren't sure what to do because we really wanted to make these great products, and we felt like we had these tools and these process opinions, and it wasn't quite working out. And this idea that great digital products don't happen by accident, it may sound a little bit like a truism, but it's not necessarily universally accepted. In fact, I think a lot of people sort of hold just the opposite opinion, that these things do happen in large part by chance. That there isn't an established process that can repeatably lead to great stuff. And I think this comes from a few places. One, it's just really hard to do in a constantly evolving and shifting technological landscape. It's tough. You kind of always have to be changing your ways. We mythologize greatness. I think that the products that do rise to that level often sort of come to us fully formed. They sort of come into our consciousness, and we think, oh wow, like there must have been some sort of genius behind that, or they sort of lucked into the right opportunity. We didn't see the maybe years of really hard work that brought these things to us, and so we kind of overlook that. I think a third point is that I don't know about you guys here, in North America, Canada, US, I guess, the prevailing philosophy, I think, is really all about product market fit. And there's a lot of evidence, and really smart people like, the Mark Andreessens of the world have assured us that product market fit is really more about the market, what it wants to do, than it really is about the product or how well designed it is per se. And so putting all this stuff together, we start to, I think, feel a little bit fatalistic and cynical maybe, a little bit paranoid. Maybe we don't know what we're talking about. I mean, we do this every day, but is there a real art and science to it? Or is it really more about luck? Is it about, finding the right client or randomly pivoting to the right opportunity, throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks? Is that what it's about? But no, we really do believe that great digital products don't happen by accident. And so what I want to talk about in the next 20 minutes or so is basically what are the elements that make up a great digital product? And if we can get a better sense of that, then how can we weave these elements into the stuff that we make? How can we make that part of our process and our focus and craft as designers? So let me go back to the first two markers of a great product. People use it, people love it. Robert Fabricant is a principal at Frog Design, and 5 years ago he gave a talk at IXDA in Vancouver, and it was called Behavior is Our Medium. And in this talk, he talked about how as interaction designers, as user experience designers, our goal should, we shouldn't really think of computing technology specifically as our medium. That our goal ultimately, and where we need to evolve as a discipline, was in shaping and guiding and eliciting and kind of drawing out human behavior itself. A really great talk, and I recommend taking a look if you haven't seen it before. In other words, we shouldn't just be designing functional stuff or usable stuff. We should be creating persuasive things, things that were compelling, things that would sort of affect behavior. And for digital product designers, I think that the first challenge for us is that we, again, want people to use our stuff, and that's not trivial. I mean, people don't just decide to use something because it exists in the world, and it's good, and it's maybe well designed. And especially when we're trying to convince people to switch over to from a competitive solution to something that we're making, it's even harder. There's research that shows that we really evaluate stuff that we currently use and underestimate stuff that we don't currently use. So there's this chasm that we have to cross. And this is, I don't know if you've heard this sort of idea that we need to create these 10x improvements in performance or experience. And that's kind of where this comes from, the sense that we need to overcome barriers that users are kind of putting up unknowingly. And so, the things that we make need to be superior, they need to be good, but they need to be more than that. They need to be compelling. They need to be persuasive. So how do we do that? I think in a larger sense, this is a kind of an age-old question, right? I mean, it's not like this is a new challenge for human beings. And so I think a really good starting point is actually to go back to Aristotle, who did a lot of deep thinking about how to be persuasive, obviously in his context of public oration and discourse. But he figured out that persuasive appeals broke down to three main categories: ethos, pathos, and logos. Maybe you've seen this in school or whatever. And so ethos is about personal credibility. It's about trust. It's a relational thing. Pathos is about the emotional connection. It's about eliciting an emotional and passionate response from the audience. And logos is the argument itself and how it's developed and structured, how logical it is. And so ethos, pathos, logos. And I want to make the case that great digital products have all three of these things, and that part of the problem that we were experiencing at Teen and Lax, and maybe you can relate to this, is that we sort of over and under index in some of these. In fact, some of these really haven't really been on our radar. We've, for example, really over indexed in rational design. We love to kind of problem solve and puzzle solve stuff on the whiteboard. We're not really thinking about how people are going to connect at a human level with the stuff that we're making. And that's what ethos is about. It's about establishing trust. And trust is a relational concept. So when we're thinking about how will somebody relate to the thing that we've made at a fundamentally human level, that's ethos. And at Teen and Lax, again, I think we've been guilty of making stuff that is functional, usable, and elegant, maybe even beautiful, and yet completely impersonal somehow. And so that just makes it untrustworthy because you can't relate to it as a human being. And so to combat this, we're really starting to focus in on our writing and our messaging design because this is, we believe, one of the most direct ways that we have to convey a sense of authorship and identity and personality. And these are the things that make up our product's voice. And so this question, what is your product's voice and why will people trust it, I think is a question that we should be asking throughout the entire design process. We should be carving out time to focus in on this. And to answer it, I've got three suggestions. These come from, and some examples, these come from Aristotle too, but I'm going to be more heavy-handedly paraphrasing here. So one, create a voice with authority, understanding, and good sense, what he called practical wisdom. Now the trick here is to accomplish this in a tone and register that connects with users. It's not just about being the smartest product in the room or elevating the level of your discourse. It's about creating something that people can connect with. And I think a great example of a company, a product, a brand that does a good job of walking this fine balance is MailChimp. And so this is their style guide. It's an awesome resource to go and look at as a case study for how do they frame up their voice, and then how do they communicate and articulate that internally. And it's awesome that they put this online for everybody to see. They've been really transparent about it. And in here, towards the beginning, they sort of have this set of contrasts. So it's fun but not childish, clever but not silly, confident but not cocky, smart but not stodgy. I think they worked really hard on this, actually, walking this fine balance. And I think it's interesting to me because even a brand like MailChimp, which if you've used it, you know it's funny, it's lighthearted, it's fun, maybe a little irreverent at times. There's still this very discerning and practical and prudent thread that they're trying to have in how they communicate with their users. This can happen in really subtle ways too. We're working on a product that is a subscription program for yoga instructional videos and courses. And so, as we were doing our prototyping, we had this pretty robotic, descriptive copy, and we started to realize that even if we just nudged it a little bit towards something a little bit more editorial and guiding, that it started to open things up. It started to make it seem a little bit more credible and trustworthy and relatable. So, these are about small changes. And then the example on the left is the kind of copy that notoriously can sort of sneak into the shipping version of the product because there's so many other things to be working on instead of figuring out how perfectly to sum something up. Secondly, sense of mission and pure-heartedness. And this may sound a little idealistic, I realize that. But again, I think people want to know, where are these products coming from? Like, who made this? Why does this exist in the world? What drove the decisions behind this? That's how you kind of relate to something and feel like you can trust it. This year we worked with one of BetaWorks' companies called Can Do, and they make a platform, a system to help kids, I guess, of all ages be able to make software and apps without having to know how to code. One of the things that really impressed me about their company was that they really see themselves as being part of a larger maker movement that's getting hooked into youth culture. And so on their blog, in addition to the regular product announcement stuff that you'd expect, they sort of celebrate this movement. They cover it with stories that they think are cool, that will resonate, and that connect with their larger sense of purpose and mission. And this filters into everything they say and do in and around their app and really who they are as a company. And it comes through, and you can kind of get a sense of it when you use their stuff. Basecamp is a company that I think really nails it when it comes to conveying a sense of mission and pure-heartedness. And I want to highlight them because they can demonstrate that this isn't about altruism. This is a very rational kind of business-oriented mission statement that they've got here. And they say things like, we're in business to stay in business, and we've got 15 profitable years in a row to back it up. I think it's kind of funny that in this day and age, being in business and having a sustainable business is sort of this noble pursuit. But it sort of is, and they've raised it to something that's kind of missional. And this comes across everywhere. If you look at their privacy policy, if you look at their marketing materials and actually use their software. Finally, we want to show a genuine affection and care and sort of a sense of friendliness towards the user, goodwill. A great place to do this is in the user experience stuff that we make. I think Pinterest does a really good job of this. If you've gone through their onboarding experience recently, or if you've read anything about it, you'll know that they've taken really painstaking care to think through how the product presents itself. and expresses itself in those first few moments. And so this is an opportunity that I think is kind of unique for our digital products, because it's a time when users are paying a little bit closer attention, and they're trying to work with you to figure out whether this is going to be something that's valuable to them. So you can have a conversation and sort of guide them along. And Pinterest does a great job of making it feel like they're really excited for you to be using this system. Slack is another example of a product with a really strong and yet friendly voice. And I know this isn't an accident, because this is exactly what Stuart did in the early days of Flickr too, for those of you who remember that. At the end of the onboarding process for Slack, you meet this Slack bot, and it introduces itself, and it sort of has a conversation with you, and it's a really clever way of using the product to explain itself. But it's just a really lovely touch that literally gives the product a friendly voice right at the beginning of your experience with it. And so overall, I think there's a lot of creative opportunities that we've got to express and refine and build our product's voice. I've highlighted a few ways to do this in a trustful way. But I think the larger point to take home here is just that, again, we need to be carving out time to think through this kind of stuff. It can't just sort of happen in a copy deck that somebody sort of works on in some corner of the office. We need to be writing our copy from the moment that we start hitting the whiteboard. And we need to be putting it into our prototypes. We need to be evaluating it and critically being aware of it as we build this stuff out. I think this is really important. All right, pathos. So pathos is all about emotional appeal of your product or service. This guy, Adrian Slywotsky, he's done some really interesting research. He's an author and a consultant, and he has done some fascinating kind of inquiry into why some products drive disproportionately high amount of demand compared to their competitors, who on paper are pretty similar. And one of the things that he points out, and he's sort of coined this term, magnetic products, which really speaks to this idea of emotional resonance that's intentionally built into a product. And this is a quote from an article online of his. He says, when it comes to creating demand, it's not the first mover that wins, it's the first to create the emotion and capture the emotional space in the market. Do you guys remember the Apple video that they opened their WWDC event with last year? This one here. I think it does a really beautiful job of framing up this idea of intentional emotional resonance and pathos. And it's sort of like a bit of a, I guess, a philosophy that they've expressed here. This part right here coming up, they say, the first thing we ask is, what do we want people to feel? And then they go through some examples, and then they say, what we do is essentially craft around that intention. I think that's a great question to be focusing on as we're designing. What do we want people to feel when they use our product? And this is another question that's really easy to shirk away from. Just like with ethos, how will people relate and trust your product? What do you want people to feel? I mean, it's tough to do, right? Emotions are ephemeral. They're subjective. It's hard to measure them. And so oftentimes we sort of, I think, ignore it and just focus on the tangible stuff that we have in front of us to do. There's lots of, like I say, puzzles to solve instead of thinking about this. But emotionalizing products, I think, is a tractable design problem. Don Norman breaks it down to the emotional design into 3 levels: visceral, the look and feel, behavioral, the sort of the joy of using something and engaging with it, and then reflective, which is a little bit more contemplative, personal story, identity kind of stuff. I think for digital design, for digital kind of products, one interesting trend that I'm seeing is that the first 2 here, the look and feel, the visceral and the behavioral, really kind of fold in and feed each other. I think Google's material design stuff is a really great example where this is headed. They've done a lot of kind of conscientious work to, I think, blend those two things together. And so I pulled this quote from their material design guidelines site. I don't know, Mateus or somebody wrote this, I guess, and they say that the most basic use of animation is in transitions, but an app can truly delight when animation is used in ways that go beyond the obvious. These animations serve dual functions to inform the user and then to also imbue your app with a moment of wonder and a sense of superb craftsmanship. Users do notice such small details. And so, there's a sense of charm that we can sort of achieve, of enchantment, of energy. In the process of making a social shopping app called Crush this year, we wanted to have this endorsing action here, and we really wanted to make it feel satisfying and kind of addictive, like you were putting your weight behind the stuff that you were endorsing. You weren't just liking it casually. We played with literally dozens of versions, a lot of them kind of getting to pretty close to production level code, because this was really important to us. And it was a mechanical thing. It was important for the user interface and so on, but it was ultimately, I think, more of an exercise in designing for emotion. Reflective design. I think that this is all about story and narrative, but it's not about the story and narrative of your product or your brand. It's about the story or narrative that you are casting for your user to inhabit, basically. And so when I come to a product like Airbnb, there's a strong sense of who I am cast as here, who I'm recognized to be, who I'm empowered to become. I'm an adventurer. I'm a citizen of the world. I'm part of a community of explorers. Who knows where I'm going to go or who I'll meet along the way. And so that's reflective design. It's about creating an identity for somebody to live in your product. And so that's pathos, the emotional appeal of your product. And I'm convinced that this is a secret to building experiences that stand out, that are memorable, that are persuasive. And it starts with a very simple yet powerful question. What do you want people to feel when they use your product? Finally, logos. The products that we make need to have a logical appeal. So what does that mean in practice? Julie Zhu is Facebook's design director. She's a lovely person. She's a very smart, conscientious design manager, and she wrote a piece on Medium about building products for high concept problems. High concept problems she borrowed from the movie industry. It's sort of the elevator pitch, 1 or 2 line version of what the core kernel of the story is going to be. And she said this: what problem is your product or service trying to solve? If you cannot describe it to someone else and have them instantly understand the pain, frustration, annoyance of this problem, then what you're building probably is never going to get that much traction. So what problem is your product or service trying to solve? It's really important to be clear about this. We often trip right out of the gate, I think, and just begin to try and create solutions for problems that were ill-defined or not validated or maybe non-existent altogether. And as Julie points out, the answer to this question can't just be, the problem is we're the Airbnb for X, or we're mobile social Y, right? Those aren't problems. They may be helpful descriptors, but they're not problems. They're slides in a pitch deck. No. What problem? What is the actual problem in the real life world that your product or service is trying to solve? So quick, what problem does this solve? It's beautiful. It's got lots of pathos. It's very pathosy. But I don't know what problem it's solving yet. And I'm not really having a go at it. I think maybe it's okay for now for that to be a little bit of a mystery. But in order for our stuff to be great, we ultimately have to wrestle with this question, and it can be very hard because it's something that you feel like you know, and as soon as you start to try and articulate it, you realize you don't. So how do we go about addressing this question? The first thing that we want to do is interrogate the ostensible problem that we're working on. So we don't want to just sort of accept the brief or the requirements list or a backlog of to-dos and just take that at face value and start working. We want to validate it. We really love, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this jobs to be done framework for doing this. It's a really great way to get sort of deeper, more causal insights into consumer behavior. And so if you're not familiar with it, basically the theory is that people just don't just buy products or services or download apps or whatever because they are fitting into some demographic or market segment or whatever. They do it because they have these jobs to be done in their lives that they are trying to make progress towards. So nobody ever woke up in the morning and said, well, I'm a millennial with this household income and I live in this zip code, so I guess I'll buy this product. People have reasons for what they do. And these jobs are actually things you can find out. If you can find people who have recently switched maybe from one product to another, and you sort of investigate. It's sort of like a police investigation if you've ever done this type of interview, where you're basically just trying to figure out what happened, like what were the triggers, what led to what were the anxieties, what was the energy that got you over those humps, what actually happened. You're not asking people to tell you what they want. You're asking them just what happened. And some really interesting and helpful insights can come out of this. For example, we worked with a large OEM, Android OEM, on their product strategy and design for the last couple of years. And some of the jobs that came out of that process were things like an arc for your memory. So we started to see that people were really kind of aware that they would be using these phones to capture and house moments that they would treasure forever. And they wanted to understand what that was going to be like, how it would work, how effective these devices would be in doing it. Lightweight mobile office, inner circle lifeline. Like we saw that people had these very small groups of close-knit, strong tie relationships, and they wanted to have ways of being in very close contact with those people. And these aren't blinding insights, right? They're kind of obvious actually when you sort of think about it. But what they are is very kind of tangible, practical jobs that you can start to craft design decisions around and set priorities around. Once you've got jobs, what you want to do then is figure out what does success look like. So how will you know that you've achieved those jobs? And so here you want to look for leading indicators of behaviors that map onto a job that you're working on, and you make basically educated, at least the best we can do right now is make educated guesses about what those things are going to look like. So for example, the yoga project I mentioned a little while ago is very simple. Like the job there was to connect with and sort of commit to basically your yoga practice. And so we said success for that is going to look like somebody signs up for this app and takes 3 courses in a month. That's it. That's all we're trying to do. And of course, there's all kinds of stuff and features that we need to think about. But at the end of the day, when we're going to be prioritizing, we're going to be editing and focusing, this is what we're working towards. And then you do this relentless focusing. You basically, maybe you build a backlog and you use that to filter and prioritize. I think it's important to go wide, and explore lots of different options, but then come back to that focus. So, for example, with Medium, we'd worked on lots of different ideas for framing up your stories and ideas. And we had some really cool stuff. We'd built this stuff out. It was ready to ship. Stuff like, collaborative writing with other people and other kinds of media types. And all these features are really great. But ultimately, when it came time to ship, Ev sort of pulled everything back to a very simple storytelling experience and authoring experience. That's it. That's what this thing was going to be focused around. And so it's simple now, much more so than some of the ideas that we had early on. And so the point to remember here is to basically validate your problem first, and then figure out what success will look like for that, and then relentlessly focus on achieving that. So that's it. So that's ethos, pathos, logos. And we want to make products that are more meaningful, more whole, more persuasive, because they have all of these ingredients to them. This is where we're going as a company at TN&Lax. And so ethos, the question here is, what is your product's voice and why will people trust it? Pathos, what do you want people to feel when they use your product? And logos, what problem is your product actually trying to solve? And I think as designers, if we can answer these questions well, we will have the opportunity to make things that have at least a chance of becoming something that's truly great. Thanks.